Hello and welcome to Rhythm Basics for Guitar lesson number 3. My name is Hunter McDermott and I teach guitar here in beautiful Apex, North Carolina. You can check me out online at anyonecanplayguitar.org. And I'm here to teach you about rhythm. We've covered several things in the past couple lessons. We looked at time signatures. Only one of them, and that's all I want you to focus on right now, is understanding what 4/4 time means. We looked at different types of notes. We had the whole note, the half note, the quarter note, and then last lesson we talked about the eighth note, and we introduced the concept of alternating our strumming, which is a very guitar and like-minded instruments-centric technique, right? We don't need to worry about alternating when we're playing a piano or we're playing a clarinet, right? But on the guitar, or a mandolin or a ukulele, up and down strums become important because we want to maximize the amount of notes that we can play so that we may play more quickly and more efficiently, those are both good things. Alright, so what we're going to talk about in this lesson is a way to make these different note types more flexible. A way in which we can extend the duration of a note to varying degrees to fit what we want it to be, right? If I say I want a note that lasts for 3 beats, well, I got a whole note, that's 4, a half, that's 2, quarter is 1, eighth is a half. So I don't have a note type that lasts for 3 beats unless I manipulate some of the notes that we have, and that's what we're going to talk about. So there are 2 ways to extend the duration of a note, and those are the tie and the dot. Let's look at the dot first. So, we're going to talk about some more math, so I hope you're ready. But I promise it's easy. Easy math. So, a dotted note, you can take any note that we've currently talked about, and you may add a dot to it. And what that does is it will multiply the original note value, in other words, the number of beats that it normally takes up. So it multiplies the original note value by 1.5. Alright, so we're dealing with decimals now. Crazy, right? You can think of this dot in operating in multiple ways, but this is the way I like to do it because it's just easy numbers. It's a little less abstract. Okay, so for example, if I take a whole note, we talked about a whole note equaling 4 beats. Okay, so now let's take this whole note and let's just stick a dot right next to it. And that's key because there are different kinds of dots in music. The dot we're talking about always goes to the right of the note. The dot is right next to it, almost like a period, kind of, sort of. Alright, so this is a whole note. It lasts for 4 beats. This is called a dotted whole note. Alright, so let's do this basic math here. So, a dotted note, multiply the original note value by 1.5. Okay, so the original note value of a whole note, as we talked about in the first lesson, is 4. It takes up 4 beats. So when I play it, I count 4 beats before I'm done playing that note, and I move on to the next thing. Alright, so we take 4, and we multiply that by 1.5. Okay, so what is 4 times 1.5? Well, it's short enough where you could just add them if you want. 1.5 plus 1.5 plus 1.5 plus 1.5 would give you 6. 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3, and 3 and 3 is 6. So a dotted whole note takes up 6 beats. So if I had a measure that was big enough, I could put a dot next to a whole note and make it take up that 6 beats of time there. Now, what we talked about so far with 4/4 time, there's actually not even possible to play this note because we only have 4 beats in a measure, and we can't have a note spill over into the next measure. Or can we? We'll look in a minute about how we can do that. But in general, we have a whole note, which is 4 beats, and a dotted whole note, which is 6. Alright, so let's look at Another example. Let's turn these half notes into, or whole notes into half notes. So now I have a half note, which takes up 2 beats, like we talked about. And then I have a dotted half note. Alright, so doing the same thing. Take the original note value, in this case it's 2, and multiply it by 1.5. So what's 1.5 times 2? You could just add them. 1.5 plus 1.5 would give you 3. So if I take a half note and I put a dot next to it, it no longer takes up 2 beats, now it takes up 3. And there you go, there's that magical note that we alluded to that takes up 3 beats. You just alter one of the types of notes that we started with, our half note in this case. Alright, let's do one more. Let's look at the quarter note, which normally takes up 1 beat. If I take that quarter note and I stick a dot onto it, we take the original note value, which is 1, and we multiply it by 1.5. Anything times 1 is itself, so 1 times 1.5 is 1.5. Or in terms of beats, you could say that it takes up 1.5 beats. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's look at an example of this dotted business. I'll give us another measure here in 4/4 time. And at the very beginning, I'm going to put a dotted a dotted quarter note. Now, this is not always the case, but very often when you see a dotted quarter note, it will be followed by a single eighth note. Because this takes up 1.5 beats, and a single eighth note would take up half of a beat, and you put those together and you get 2. So that means it's very handy to have this extra half of a beat sticking out here because it kind of just evens things back up. This is a half note. Okay, so this is beat 1. 2 is right here. This eighth note comes in on the and then I've got a half note which takes up beats 3 and 4. Alright, hang with me here. We added some new stuff. Let's take a look at it. I'm in 4/4 time, like we're going to be. I've got 4 beats here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. At the very beginning I put a quarter note and then I dotted it. So now it is no longer 1 beat long, it is a beat and a half long, so it's a little bit longer. So that means that that dotted half note takes up all of beat 1, as it would normally do, and the first half of beat 2. Alright? We talked about in the last lesson about eighth notes, how we can, by putting eighth notes in there, we can take a beat and we can split it into 2 smaller pieces. The first half of a beat is known as whatever the beat is. Beat 1, beat 2, 3, or 4. And the second half of the beat, that sort of the space between beats there, is known as the and. I use a plus sign because it's easy to draw, but that represents the word and. So this means that quarter note takes up both beats 1 and the first half of 2, and then what we have left, the very next thing comes in on the and of 2. So if you've taken up 1.5 beats, then what remains is the other half of that second beat, and that's where we put something. We put an eighth note there. That eighth note by itself takes up only half of a beat, so that takes up only the second half of beat 2. So now we're kind of even things out again. And right on 3, I just put a half note, and that takes care of both beats 3 and 4. Just finishes out the measure for us. So if you want to know that your measure is complete, you just take all of the various notes that you have in there and you add them up, and you make sure that it equals the number of beats that you have. So 1.5 plus a half is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. So we did it correct. We filled up every part of the measure. Alright, so let's look at what this might sound like. Let's listen to what this might sound like. Let's do an A chord. Okay, so let's get that beat going again. I'm going to slow it down a little bit though, so we can really understand this. Let's go down to 60. So it's a little slower, a little easier to hear there. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 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 3, 4. 2. One more time. 2 and 3, 4. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm playing on 1, then the and of 2, then I'm playing on 3, and that finishes out the measure, and then I just repeated it. Alright? Now, one other thing that ties into the eighth note stuff we talked about last time is the strumming direction. So whenever I've got a quarter note, I would play down, because that quarter note is happening right there on that first beat, so it's in line with the beat. Alright, then when I had this eighth note here, like we talked about last time, this eighth note comes in on the end of 2, the second half of 2. So it's not right on the beat, it's off of the beat, which typically you will play with an up strum. Then on beat 3, we're back to our down strum here, so we've evened it back out. So I'm playing down, up, down. So that's 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, up, down. Now this rhythm at this tempo is slow enough where it's not a big deal. Like you could go down 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4 if you want. But again, conventionally, we would strum up on those eighth notes, unless we're going for some sort of rock kind of sound, you know. But we'll get into that kind of stuff in the future, maybe. So, in general, we want to strum up on those off beats, down on the beats themselves. Alright, so looking at that shows us a great example of how we can add a dot to a note to extend its duration. Alright, moving on. Let's talk about the tie. So a tie is just another way that we can extend the duration of our notes. Tied notes. And honestly, tied notes are a little bit more flexible. They give us more options for extending. So they're a little bit more useful, I guess you could say, than dotted notes. But if you don't need to use a tie, then you might as well use a dotted note. Dotted notes, because they are a little less flexible, they're easier to read, easier to understand and count, as you'll see in a sec. Alright, so what a tied note does is it connects two or more notes together. Right? So for example, if I took a quarter note here, and a quarter note takes up one beat, and I take another quarter note, which also takes up one beat, and I tie them together, so that's what our tie looks like. It's just kind of a little curvy line that goes underneath the notes that connects them. That would be equal, that would be the same thing as me playing a half note. So one beat tied to another beat would be like playing two beats, playing a note that lasts for two beats, which is the same thing as a half note. So what we would do then is we don't play the quarter and then play this quarter. What we're doing is we're playing the first note, the note where the tie originates, but then we're just going to hold that note through every other note that it's tied to. So it's kind of like we're taking all of those notes and we're just adding them all up together into one really long note. So we're not going to play each individual note that we see that's tied together. You just play the very first note, and then everything that's tied to it just kind of gets added to the duration that you're holding that note, the length that you're holding that note. So this example really is kind of silly, because if I could do a half note, why would I bother doing a quarter tied to a quarter if it's the same thing? Well, one thing that makes ties really flexible and really useful is that they're the only way in which you can extend a note beyond the end of the measure. So for example, I could put a bar line right down the middle there, which would imply that this note comes in on beat 4 of some previous measure, and this would be on beat 1 of the next measure. So we're kind of crossing over that boundary. And the tie is the only way to do that. So say I got to the end of this measure and I wanted a note to last for 2 beats, but I'm already on beat 4 and I don't have 2 beats left in the measure, I've only got 1. I can't put a half note there because there's not enough room for it to fit. So the only way I could do that would be to put a quarter, which does fit, but then tie it across the bar line into a new measure of 4 beats where I could add more notes that I want to connect it to. So now the example makes a little bit more sense. This takes up 2 beats, this also takes up 2 beats, but in this example this crosses over, this sort of straddles 2 measures, whereas the half note can't do that. The half note has to fit within the confines of only 1 measure. Now tied notes, as I said up here, is you can connect 2 or more. So you have to connect 2, but you can connect more than 2. I could add another quarter note and I could tie those together, and then I could have a really long note. So let's do maybe a quarter here and another quarter here and tie all of these together. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4 beats, and they're all connected. So now that would be kind of like playing a whole note. So again, I don't strum each of these 4 quarter notes. I only strum the first one, and then I just hold that note all the way until I'm done with the tied notes. So I'm just kind of like imagining adding 4 quarter notes together, which would give me 1 whole note in this case. So that's why that tie is very flexible. It gives us lots of options. We can connect, you can even tie together 2 dotted notes, so you can kind of combine those 2 things to get all kinds of funky amounts, like maybe a note that takes up 4/6 or whatever, some interesting fraction of a beat. Okay, so let's look at a rhythm to finish out this lesson here that is extremely popular. Oh my gosh, once you learn this rhythm, you are going to be ready to play I don't even know how many songs. Tons of songs. And what's nice about it is that even if that rhythm is not used in whatever song you want to know, chances are you can use it anyway, and it'll sound pretty good. It's flexible in that way. It's sort of just a generic kind of rhythm, but it's a good one. And we're going to make use of a tie to make this rhythm happen. We'll do it in 2 steps. So, step number 1. Let's get the basic structure of our rhythm going on here. So I'm going to write a quarter note. We're still in 4/4 time. Get used to it. So that's beat 1. And then on beats 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to write pairs of 8th notes. So that those 2 8th notes make up beat 2, these 2 make up beat 3, and these 2 make up beat 4. And like we talked about, the first in a pair of 8th notes is whatever the beat is, so that's beat 3, and then the second one is called the and, so we have to count that and part of the beat there. And following our alternate strumming convention, we strum down on every quarter note, and then we strum down and up on every pair of 8th notes. So let's play this very basic rhythm. This is another example of just combining those different types of notes. We'll do an E chord. Alright, here we go. Let's just play this rhythm a few times. Let me get the beat going. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and quarter, 8ths, 8ths, 8ths. So down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down. Alright, that's step one. We're almost to the actual rhythm. I just wanted to try that real quick just to get our quarters and eighths laid out there. Alright, so to make this more interesting and to transform it into what we really want it to be, I'm going to add a tie between the and of 2 and beat 3. Alright, now remember what we said about a tie. A tie effectively joins two notes into one longer note. So here, I am strumming the and of 2, just like I was before, just like I did a minute ago. But now, because that's tied over to this note here on beat 3, I'm not going to also strum 3 anymore. Because by adding that tie, I've basically blended that other eighth note into the and of 2. Right, so and of 2 is just a longer note now. So I don't strum both of the notes that are tied, only the first one. So that means I can remove this arrow right here because I'm not strumming. So on 3, I'm going to play the same thing I just played, except on beat 3, I'm going to move my hand down, but I'm not going to strum. Alright, the reason why I want to move my hand down is because on either side of that beat 3, on the and of 2 and the and of 3, I'm strumming up. The only way after I strum up that I can strum up again is if I move down, right? I can't strum up twice unless at some point I go down below the strings, otherwise there are no more strings to strum. So on 3, to help me with this rhythm, I'm just going to make a little bit, I'm going to kind of exaggerate my down motion to keep my hand in constant movement so that I can get those up strums in a nice even fashion. Alright, so let's bring the beat back and let's try this rhythm out. What chord have I not done? Let's do F. Alright, it's the same thing that we just did, just minus the strum on beat 3. 2, 3, 4. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. 2 and 3 and 4 and so I'm exaggerating 3. 3. Down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. 2, 3 and 4 and 1. And there you have it. Very popular rhythm. Now, I don't expect you guys, if you're new to reading rhythms or playing guitar, I don't expect you to get that one very quickly. The other ones are decently easy enough where I would hope that you're with me up to this point. This one, I want you to just take some more time with and really get it down. Go slow. What's very important, why we talk about this whole alternating strumming thing at all, what's important is that we are staying true and staying closely attuned to that beat that we started the series out talking about, where I was just sitting here and feeling the beat. Right? I'm not thinking about counting anything or anything like that at that point. I'm just feeling it. I'm kind of letting myself internalize it so that I don't have to think about it quite so much. I'm just feeling it at that point, which is really what we want for anything that we play. So take your time with this rhythm and think about how that arm, that right arm and that wrist and all that strumming motion is very constant. Right? I'm not stopping. I'm not jerking back and forth. You know, that kind of thing, which is very common when you're first getting started with this kind of thing because you feel like, well, if I'm not strumming, why do I have to move, right? That's where this alternating strumming convention comes into play. It gets you constantly moving so that the flow and the feeling of playing along with a beat is not diminished, right? It stays constant. Then you don't, again, for the purposes of not having to count, but just to feel the music, right? If you've ever gone to a concert or watched somebody perform music who's been at it a while, they are probably dancing around or moving around like even I do when I play something. Just because, you know, part of it's because, like, hey, I'm having a good time and, you know, I'm enjoying what I'm doing and the music that I'm making. But the main thing is it's a way to keep time, right? If you're moving your body, then you're basically dancing. And when you're dancing, you don't have to think about 1, 2, 3, 4. You're just feeling the music and you're internalizing it, and that's where fun comes from, right? That's why music is fun, because of the way it makes you feel. So when you're practicing this rhythm, and I suggest you practice it a lot because it is going to be an essential part of your strumming arsenal, your rhythm playing is going to hinge upon your knowledge of this rhythm here, and others, but this one mainly. Just take the time and get that arm moving and never let it stop. Even if you're strumming or not strumming, your hand is like a machine and it just goes in time with that beat. All right, and this is a very, very famous rhythm. You've heard it, and the one I like to use is Time of Your Life by Green Day. Right, that kind of thing. If you speed it up, then you start to go like, oh yeah, I've heard stuff like that. It's pretty cool. All right, so we talked about 2 ways that you can extend the duration of notes. We talked about dotted notes, which you take the original note value, in other words, the number of beats that note normally lasts, and you multiply it by 1.5 to extend it basically by 50%. Makes it a little bit longer, which allows you to get kind of these odd in-between amounts of beats that we want sometimes. And the other slightly more flexible but a little bit harder to read version of that concept is the tie, where you're taking 2 or more of the same note. I don't think I said that earlier. It has to be the same note. You can't tie 2 notes together that aren't the same. They have to be all the same. You tie 2 or more of the same notes together to form basically a long note that's the sum of all of those notes that are tied together. And one big advantage of the tie is that it is the only way to extend a note beyond the end of a measure. So you can draw out, if you've got an instrument where you can sustain a note for a really long time, you can tie a whole note to another whole note to another whole note and just let it go. A lot of string parts will be like that because you're just trying to maintain this kind of long note for whatever purpose. One disadvantage of the tie is that it looks kind of funky, right? I still see the same rhythm that I started with, but because of this tie, it's interpreted a little bit different. So sometimes it can be just a little bit harder to read to figure out, okay, how long am I holding this note? Whereas the dot is very explicit about how long you're holding the note. So there's a little bit more work involved with the tie, but it also yields a little bit more flexibility, so it's worth it. So become very familiar with both of those, and finally, this rhythm in particular, unlike the rhythms that we looked at before, which were just example rhythms, this is really something that you should know as a guitar player to do any kind of rhythm playing. If you're a singer, even if you're not playing with a lead guitar player or some other musician, just to back them up and accompany some other instrument or your own voice, this is a fantastic rhythm to know, so learn it. All right, next lesson, we're going to talk about what it sounds like when you don't play. So we're going to talk about rests. Stay tuned. Lesson number 4. Thanks.